2023 served as a deadly year for the Gaza Strip after Israel's brutal bombardment of the densely populated enclave. With thousands of Palestinians killed and no ceasefire in sight, will 2024 see an expansion of the conflict to the wider region? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. In 2023, the calamity of war and devastation was unleashed with Israel's disproportionate bombardment of Gaza after October 7 attack. The world witnessed Israel's rampant carpet bombing that targeted hospitals, schools and refugee centers, killing over 20,000 Palestinians, with 70% of them being women and children. Press freedom also found itself under threat as at least 90 journalists in Gaza were killed covering the conflict under extreme circumstances. Western reactions have since remained idle, especially after the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in the besieged Strip. Since then, talks for an end to the human suffering have remained delayed. Among the regional countries, Turkiye has very staunchly defended the Palestinian cause, labeling Israel as a terrorist state and slamming its Western backers. Ankara has called for de-escalation of the conflict while also proposing to play a mediator role. Recently, Houthi rebels launched at least 100 attacks on 12 different commercial ships in the Red Sea in what they called revenge against Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The Red Sea corridor is a vital waterway for passage of goods, making up to 12% of global trade. Experts fear that the heightened tensions in the region could potentially change the security environment and disrupt the flow of global capital, resulting in a spillover effect. And to talk about the 2023 Israel attack on Gaza, joining me now from Birmingham, the United Kingdom, is Kamal Hawash. He is a founding member of British Palestine Committee. From Doha, Tamer Karmout, an assistant professor at Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. And from Istanbul, Ali Ahmadi, an executive fellow at Geneva Center for Security Policy. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Kamal, let me begin with you. Almost 3 months into Israel's brutal attack on Gaza, what do you make of the current situation and what does a besieged enclave look like?
First of all, I just cannot believe that we are in this third month of absolute slaughter by the fourth strongest military state in the world against a defenseless civilian population. Yes, there is Hamas, there are other factions, but their weapons are negligible in comparison. But the devastation, the killing, is quite unbelievable, and the silence of the international community and the playing with words like ceasefire and pause and sustainable ceasefire while people are being slaughtered and children being blown to bits is horrendous. The world must stop this absolute slaughter of Palestinian civilians.
So, Tamer, UNICEF says Gaza is the most dangerous place in the world for children. Around 1 million children have been forcibly displaced from their homes and families are torn apart. So where is this headed and why, as Kamal mentioned, does the international community fail to intervene?
Aisha, what's happening in Gaza, sadly, is a case study to be taught in schools now on the failure of humanity to address the very dire and catastrophic humanitarian needs in the Gaza Strip. It's not about children. It's about every Palestinian, every civilian trapped in this small enclave while the international community is watching and it's unable to even to provide the minimum protection mechanism for civilians in conflict times. We have seen a very dangerous politicization of international law. UN has been pretty much marginalized. We have been seeing many UN experts who have been screaming that what's happening in Gaza is genocide and it has to be stopped immediately, and they're demanding investigations. But the political level or the politicians at the UN have been more or less pushing back on these expert voices We have seen the ICC fully complicit and lacking any objectivity and neutrality to open an immediate investigation on all the crimes committed on Gaza on a daily basis. And when you compare this to their conduct in Ukraine, you can see the outstriking hypocrisy and the double standards on this. Mm-hmm. So sadly, the international community and humanity has failed Gaza and has failed Palestinians in this.
So, Ali, Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, was in Egypt on Wednesday for ceasefire talks. And according to some sources, Mossad chief met with Qatar's prime minister. Have hopes of new troops and maybe a prisoner exchange gained momentum lately?
Well, there was some momentum for when there was a short-lived ceasefire, but at this point, it's not clear how exactly we're going to get a ceasefire, considering Israel's domestic politics, where you have an increasingly right-wing government that wants aggression, wants revenge, and it seems that they believe that Gaza should essentially be ungovernable, so that it cannot be governed by Hamas. So it's not necessarily clear how exactly we're going to get to a ceasefire. The United States has said essentially in their talks with the Israelis that they want a ceasefire, that they want to essentially the Israelis to move to a less intensive form of fighting in the new year after Christmas. But the Israelis have been pushing back on that and any talk of a ceasefire. So there are some negotiations going on. That's good. But at this point, we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel.
So, Kamal, what do you think? Because Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war until the end. So how viable is this? And could a wider military operation, let's say also covering Gaza's south, would dislodge Hamas from these besieged territories?
First of all, Israel has been acting with complete immunities since before the 7th of October. So nothing has changed. What the so-called international community, in particular the US, UK, and the EU, have given it a free hand to do whatever it wants. And the thing that is significant about this war is the extent of Israeli lies that have been spewed out and repeated by media across the world, particularly those loyal to their governments, in that it lied about asking people to leave northern Gaza and to head to the south. It shelled them and killed them. Then it said you must go to the furthest, most southerly point, Rafah, and it's been killing them there. So it is difficult to believe anything that Israel says, which means that it just continues to kill and maim. And every moment that it does that, we lose more and more Palestinians. And I have to say, I was troubled this morning to also read that the Americans in particular are leaning heavily, pressurizing Switzerland for there not to be a consideration of Israel's breaches of the international humanitarian law and the Geneva Convention. For goodness sake, it's clear to all of us that there is a breach of that. To protect it from it shows not only complicity by the US, but that it has done, joined the war against the Palestinian people, not Hamas.
So, Tamer, there is also growing discontent among Israel's closest allies, especially the United States, over its military operations. Is Israel losing this unwavering global support it had enjoyed since the start of the conflict?
Aisha, that's a very good question. But the thing is, yes, we have seen like important changes in many of the Western countries, especially like in EU, like countries like Germany, UK, etc. Many of these countries have adapted or changed their positions on the conflict, and they're demanding of humanitarian ceasefires, long pauses, etc. But the problem is, again, none of them have matured enough to reach the point to clearly demand an end of war. So basically, what their behavior more or less is that, yes, they're embarrassed by their positions because, of course, the global opinion is swifting and changing towards Palestine and to demand an immediate stop of this massacring in Gaza. They're embarrassed by the public pressure in their own countries, by demonstrations. This is a crime that is being aired on live on TVs all over the world. Yes. The globe is watching, and there is so much frustration and anger. However, yes, I mean, they're moving now to the right direction, but I don't think they're moving out of love or respect or to humanity and to end this war, just because of pressure. And still, we don't hear the key wording, which is an immediate stop of this war. Stop, end of this war, not negotiating over ceasefires and humanitarian aid access and etc. And they haven't matured yet when it comes to this.
So, Ali, what do you make of Qatar's role in striking a previous deal between Hamas and Israel? I mean, how has the latest intervention boosted the country's status as a mediating power?
Right. Qatar has been the key go-to ally of the United States when it comes to negotiating with entities and countries that the United States is not necessarily keen to negotiate with. They've been involved in Iran-U.S. negotiations to some extent about regional conflict issues. They've facilitated negotiations with the Taliban over the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. And here again, you see Qatar sort of presenting itself as a convening power. It really punches above its weight in terms of it being a very small country, but it's managed to facilitate the diplomatic offices of both Hamas and the Taliban, and through which, rather than being condemned, it has managed to be a very key partner for the United States in facilitating U.S. negotiations with various parties in the region. So it has definitely made itself a major diplomatic force in the region.
So, Kamal, the UN Security Council will vote on a resolution for scaled-up humanitarian access to Gaza. What are your expectations? Will it be voted down again by the United States, or Washington is looking for an alternative solution?
It's taken almost 3 days to arrive at a point where they still haven't agreed. And let's be clear, it is the United States versus the rest of the world, and in particular the other 14 members of the Security Council. It'll be interesting to see what Britain does, because last time it abstained. But the reality is, the longer it goes on, the more watered down the resolution will be from the initial text. What I'm interested in is that aid gets to the Palestinian people and the killing stops. It doesn't look as if this resolution will do the latter, i.e. stop the killing of Palestinians, even in schools and hospitals, as people have seen on the TV screens. And therefore, it is important that aid is allowed to get in. And when I say allowed, that it's not attacked as it goes in from all entry points, from Rafah, from Karem, Shalom, the crossing, etc. Because at the end of the day, we have to think about these human beings. Not only have they lost 20,000 of their relatives, but any moment they could die and lose more. So the killing has to stop. And then we need real accountability for Israel. To see Netanyahu standing in The Hague will be a message to any other authoritarian regimes, as Israel is, that you cannot get away with it. I know it may seem a long way off, but that's what we need to see.
So, Tamar, what do you think? I mean, are you hopeful that someone will be held accountable for the killing of these, like, civilians and journalists reporting under extreme circumstances?
Well, Aisha, that's a good question. I mean, the ICC, for instance, have literally failed Palestinians when it comes in this conflict. I mean, the General Prosecutor Karim Khan, I mean, he has been under huge scrutiny and pressure, and he has to answer for so many questions. And you know what? If he really feels pressured because of some influences coming from big powers, the right thing to do is to step down for him and say and express his opinion, same like so many other UN officials, senior ones, have stepped down over muzzling and over pressure coming from politicians. So, but the thing is, even if we have a dysfunctional ICC or a UN system when it comes to bringing criminals like Netanyahu and his generals to international justice, I think that we still have plenty of opportunities, I mean, to go to a national courts and national judiciary system anywhere in the world, including the US, UK. So, yes, I mean, all concerned parties, NGOs, entities, legal entities, they should start collecting all these evidences, which are available everywhere now, and they're easy to access with all the huge coverage of the massacre in Gaza and the witnesses and the testimonies coming out of Gaza. and they should start filing cases all over the world in these countries. The Israelis should feel the heat and fire. They should understand that there is nowhere to go. There will be that the justice that will be applied to them equally. They're no different than any other human beings on this world.
But Ali, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has also said that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will not govern Gaza once the conflict is over. What do you make of this? I mean, who is fit to govern Gaza? I mean, was he hinting at an international organization?
I don't think the Israelis have a clear strategy for at least a realistic one about what happens with Gaza once this conflict is stopped. They don't want Hamas to govern it, but there is no other authority that would be fit to govern it. Right now, the way it's going, the Gaza Strip is going to be virtually ungovernable. I mean, 60% of the housing has been destroyed.
Sure.
Public services are practically impossible. The idea of trying to put the Palestinian Authority in charge over there is simply not going to work, because it opens the Palestinian Authority up to Abu Mazen, up to further criticism about subcontracting the occupation. And so that's simply not viable. I don't think there's a clear end game. There are ideas thrown around, but none of them seem very realistic. It's there is really no authority other than Hamas that has enough power in that space to actually govern it.
So, Kamal, another idea came from U.S. President Joe Biden. He suggested Gaza and the West Bank should be reunited under a single government structure. I mean, is this both politically and physically viable? And is his administration trying to switch to focus to the end of the conflict due to rising public opposition to the U.S.'s policies towards Israel?
Well, I mean, my understanding is part of the negotiations on the text of this UN resolution is how to define the relationship between Gaza and the West Bank. In other words, not to explicitly say they must be the future Palestinian state. So let alone the question of who governs Gaza at the end of this, but actually what is the future? The international community led by the US must come to realize that it is only when the Palestinians gain their full rights, and I mean their full rights, including the right of the refugees to return, will this conflict end. What they do is support Israel in hitting at the Palestinians, hitting out, in demolishing, in killing. They think that that would create a peaceful situation for Israelis. It really will not. It will only stop once the Palestinians have their rights and they have security, as should the Israeli people have security, but on equal measures, not in a superior way where Jewish Israelis have security and rights, but the Palestinians don't. And you know, one of the ministers in this government, Smotrich, explicitly says the Palestinians shouldn't have any rights if they stay, but they could leave.
So, Tamer, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said Turkey will seek to rebuild Gaza if a ceasefire is reached. Is this a far-fetched approach given the current situation on the ground? And is Turkey's role here now limited?
Aisha, that's a very good question. So there's so many players in this conflict. I mean, important regional, international players. Turkey is one of them, of course. I mean, let's start by the fact that Turkey has been always accepted as an honest, decent broker among Palestinians, even the two divided camps, Fatah and Hamas. And the Palestinian people, I mean, have excellent, friendly, brotherly relations with Turkey as well. Turkey is perceived very positively and welcomed to intervene in this conflict. There are two things Turkey, in my opinion, I mean, thinking about the future, because at some point this conflict has to end. And there are discussions on even, I don't know, if the scenario of inviting international observers, peace observers at some point to be in the Gaza Strip, I don't think, I mean, and if it's accepted by the Palestinians, all of them, I don't see anyone better than Turkish troops, you know, because I mean, Turkey is as excellent relation with the Palestinians. Okay, they're a member of NATO. They could give some assurances to Israel as well. I mean, when talking about politique real here, when it comes to reconstruction, I would envision that Turkey, I mean, must have an important role. For one thing, Palestinians have had tense relations with Egypt, and I have to be frank about it here. And Egypt's controversial position on aid as well is being criticized by Palestinians. I mean, given the disastrous outcomes of the war now.
But
and
Egypt,
so it would be
Egypt
good for
says that Israel is blocking the Rafah border
Yes.
crossing.
It's true, but extraordinary situations require extraordinary measures as well. So when you see people are being starved next door and wiped out, and massacring, then they could do better, knowing what's Egypt and its historic role, in the Arab world. So it would be good for Palestinians to have also an alternative, another ally to rely on, especially when it comes to, let's say, building or construction a maritime bridge, to bring materials, helping in building an air bridge, to transport movement and travel of Palestinians. We have had problematic history with our big Arab neighbors as well.
Yes.
And Palestinians they need more allies to give them more options as well to be free and liberated.
Mm-hmm.
And Turkey, I think, can play a good role when it comes to this, financing logistically as well, and also when it comes to peace building and in terms of observers' capacities, etc. So yes, there are so many key roles Turkey can play. Yeah.
So, Ali, since the start of the conflict, we've been talking about the immediate and long-term impacts, economic consequences. So, how have the latest attacks by Houthis on commercial vehicles in the Red Sea already affected the global economy so far? And do you believe or expect a disruption in supply chains across the globe will emerge?
Well, I think in the short term, this is not going to be as much of a problem. We're in peak shipping season, but because of the Christmas holidays and a lot of the trade that takes place between East Asia and Europe, a lot of those supplies have been stocked up. So in the short term, it's not going to cause significant amount of damage. If this continues for a long term, it certainly could. All these ships, 1/3 of global shipping has to go through the Suez Canal. It's a vital artery connecting East Asia and Europe. And all of these ships now have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, or at least many of them do. Certainly the European companies don't want to take the position of, relinquishing any kind of commercial relationship with Israel. So they're just having all of their ships go through the Cape of Good Hope. In the medium term, one could see this having an effect on supply chains, but in the short term, the damage is going to be limited. And hopefully this is not going to go on for months and months, though it's not unimaginable that the Houthis would continue specifically targeting Israel-related ships, even if a ceasefire is reached in the conflict.
So, Kemal, what do you make of the U.S.-led naval coalition called Operation Prosperity Guardian to confront the Houthi attacks in the region? And we also know that Saudi Arabia and Egypt did not join this coalition.
Well, I mean, again, when you think of the real threat of the Houthis, yes, they're capable, but we're not talking about a major military country, certainly nowhere near near Israel, and therefore to put together a coalition. It seems to me over the top, particularly since the Houthis have said they're only going to target ships going to Israel. But it also shows you that the United States wants to protect Israel in any way, shape or form, because when talking about the economy, its economy is suffering because Eilat is apparently almost, from what I hear, a ghost town in terms of this major place that ships go to. And I think in the past American presidents would have taken action unilaterally without putting together a coalition. But it might also show that the Houthis can be a threat, that Israel is sort of pushing to be extinguished, if you like, but that might bring Iran in, and then we will have a much more complicated and much more dangerous situation that could, spiral out of control in relation to the conflict itself, when it could easily end. I mean, the Houthis have said they want to see an end to the war. Okay, let's end this war, and then there's no excuse for anyone to do, to fire any missiles or whatever, or to hit ships at Bab el-Mandeb. So that is really the ultimate thing. End this war. Let's have a complete and permanent ceasefire, and then people would begin to rebuild.
So, Tamer, very quickly, please, what might the economic fallout be if the conflict expands regionally?
Disastrous, Aisha. I mean, we're still, the entire globe still hasn't fully recovered from COVID, and then from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the repercussions. And now if you see an expanded conflict in a very critical regions like the Middle East, it's going to be disastrous.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Subarkash. If you've got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.